Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of Archaeology After Dark. I am, of course, your host, Daniel Rhodes. I'd like to introduce my first international guest, Alexander Effingham. Alexander, thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, on the spot introductions here. My name is Alexander Effingham. I'm normally called Xander. I've just finished 4 years undergraduate at the University of Sheffield in England, in Sheffield, as you can probably guess, doing archaeology Bachelor of Arts. And yeah, I finished that. I'm going on to do a master's in paleoanthropology in the fall, but at the moment I'm just sitting around vegetating as one does. And I'm here hopefully to talk about what's been happening to the department in Sheffield.
Yeah, so that brings us into what we're going to talk about today. For those of you who haven't been following the story, the University of Sheffield has unilaterally decided to shut down their Department of Archaeology despite the numerous protests, petitions, and other things that have just altogether pointed to the direction that the city itself or the university needed to keep this department open. Am I correct in saying that?
Absolutely.
So, for those who haven't been following the story, how did this all start?
I think my connection is frozen for a second there, but if you can cast your mind all the way back to before the pandemic, the ye olden days at this point, you can't before everything went funky. In 2019, two of the professors in the department who were dealt a lot with the undergraduates, did a lot of the teaching, very the public faces kind of the department. For various reasons, two of them left, which left the department pretty understaffed. Like overall, the staffing's okay, but particularly dealing with the teaching, that had thrown them into the lurch somewhat. So they had to reshuffle the department, change who was teaching what, change what was going on, who was managing who, getting all that sorted. And that left them all kind of it was a little disorganized for a while. I won't deny that bit. So the department asked the university as a whole, can we have funding for replacement professors to sort this out so we can get back onto doing what we normally do, business as normal?
Mm-hmm.
And the university back in 2019 said, fantastic. We won't just give you two, we'll give you four. And, we'll get back to being the world leading group that we are, and we'll continue that. And then obviously everything gets a little crazy for a year or so. And then it gets to remember the dates. And the department, the archaeologists go, hey, where are those four professors you said you'd give us? What's going on here? And the university goes, well, see, you haven't been putting out that much research and you haven't been making that much money. So we're thinking we might just close you down instead. And obviously that was a bit of a shock to the department, seeing as the agreement in the past was 4 new professors. And the reason that the research was lower than the university set its standards for was because some of the researchers had to step into dealing with the students to fill that time. And then there's the global pandemic going on. And, all these things stacked upon one another. And the university as a whole just goes, oh, we'll see what happens. We might can you. So this leads into this whole review process, which was very fraught. Like they have, I don't know, like a panel, like Shark Tank style. You have to come and present your case for why archaeology needs to be saved. But
So
it was
the university was asking you to sell the program to them,
yes.
Why they needed to save it.
Yeah, my connection dropped again there. So the university basically said, we'll review it and we will decide based on how you pitch yourselves whether or not we're going to save you, basically. So they had people from each year group, like post-grad, postdoc, undergrad, professors, everyone. They had everyone involved. And they had these meetings where it was so clear that they had already decided to get rid of it. Like, they had all of these, I don't know, not even metaphors, like these weird sayings they had. So there's this supermarket chain here called Marks and Spencer's, which is like very snooty and posh and whatever. So one of the arguments that the board made was, so they were like, the first complaint they had was, well, you're not getting as many students as we'd like you to, and you don't make us. They didn't say it in this term, but it was like, you don't make money, basically, because Sheffield's a big engineering school. Engineering, obviously, money hand over fist, like the kind of prices they charge for that, and the amount of students they can have in one classroom. Whereas archaeology, there's like 5 of us in a trench, and so they basically said, well, why should we keep you around if you can't fill the amount of people we want in a class? And the department says, well, you've set the requirements for entry crazy high. Like, they've set the entry requirements for people coming out of high school to go into university so high that if you were having those grades, you should probably be coding supercomputers at MIT kind of thing. Like, no offense to archaeology, we all love it, but the kind of academic they're looking for is non-existent. And so the department said, well, here's our idea. We'll lower them a little bit. We'll have all these new people come in. We'll have like this great like boost of energy. They'll all be full. And they go, well, if we look at it as supermarkets, you wouldn't like charge M&S prices for Aldi food or something like that. So it was so clear that they view it as like a brand. Like, we only care what we look like to everyone else, and no matter what you say about the benefits that archaeology and the university and the country, if it doesn't fit with our branding, you're out of here. So yeah, that was the first part of it, this like back and forth between the board and the review panel and the department. And then after that, it was pretty clear that we need to put up like an actual fight. You couldn't rely on them to be kind-hearted folks who are going to listen to the arguments, because the arguments are very solid on their own. Like, if you just look at it, if we split it into how they help the city and how they help the university, like, we're one of the leading departments in the world, especially in the country, in the world, in Europe, whatever. The news, all the work on the blue henge at Stonehenge, the second Stonehenge they found, that was us. The Sheffield Castle project, that's us. That's like all of the work in the peaks and all around the country. It's all like leading fantastic stuff, and it's a very vibrant, good department, and it's good to have it around. Like, I believe you should have a balance in your universities. Like, not everyone can be an engineer. Not everyone can be a mathematician, and not everyone wants to be. And it's a bit daft to like only cater to them. So within the university, it's a very successful department. And then outside of the university, there's like this weird contradiction going on, because the university as a whole is really focused at the moment on increasing engagement from local children, because I don't know how much of like the socioeconomics of Britain and England you guys are up to date on, but basically the North historically is much less successful. They poorer, worse outcomes, and there's a whole the bottom line is they're really trying to get people involved in the area. Like, they want to break the stigma of, well, my family's never been to university before, so I can't go. I won't go. Like, they're trying to promote engagement from local kids, so it's not all just affluent Southern people moving up to Sheffield to live there. So the university as a whole is like, oh, let's promote this. Archaeology is one of the best departments for this because we have this wonderful engagement with local schools where we go out and deal with the kid, get them engaged. Like, this is your heritage, this is your history, and you can come dig, you can come play in the dirt, play with bones. Like, it's like, what kid wouldn't love that? And we go on all these speaking tours. We hold free lectures for the whole city, just a bunch of different societies that are archaeology, like run by the archaeology department, but for anyone can join. And it just promotes and like encourages the love for your actual era. Everyone likes the archaeologists, so it fits. So they didn't like these arguments, like, oh, it doesn't matter how much you help the public, it doesn't matter what you contribute to. We're not interested. So we have to put in a pretty good effort to try and stop them. So there was all these protests that you mentioned earlier, like big, like, you know, it for something as niche as archaeology in Sheffield, people from all over the country coming, and signs and guest speakers and everything. We had multiple protests and marches, and getting outside the offices of the bigwigs, like, come on, let us in. Like, you can't just ignore us. You can't lock yourselves away in the fancy building and not talk to us, which is what they basically started doing after people started complaining. And then on the side of this, my former housemate, he's called all of the press release stuff. He started this petition on change.org or some similar website that got, I don't know, it was like 14,000 in one day. People saying, come on, get a grip, don't do this.
Yeah, I saw the petition you're talking about, and the last number of total signatures I saw on it was almost 500,000. Or
holy, I haven't checked on it since he was sat next to me, just on the computer. I'll just said this. It's incredible how these things can snowball. But yeah, 500,000 people saying, hey, maybe this is not great, and they just wouldn't listen.
And people need to understand that when you put that petition out there, it's not just people in the local community signing it. It's people, worldwide that find fault in what the university is doing.
Yeah, and it started off on a local level. Like, obviously, we don't want to lose our department. We don't want to lose professors. But this really political issue for the time, because a lot of the funding comes from the government, and the government recently, this lines up perfectly with them deciding the department's no good, is the government cut arts and humanities funding. And they're a conservative government who they kind of view it as, if it's not STEM, it's not worth funding. Like, that's where the money's at, we're not interested. So the plights of Sheffield archaeology being a thriving that is just cut down in its prime, basically, because someone in a city who's never been there is just like, oh, it's not engineering, it's not computers, it doesn't make money. Really hit with, like, particularly like the liberal newspapers like The Guardian. That's quite a big, like, that's the big left-wing one. They were really in our corner and like spreading it around. It's become this whole national issue. And yeah, that's how you get 500,000 people signing these things. There's so many, protests and discussions and meeting with the board. And I was leading a letter writing campaign, which it got so many important people. Like, that sounds like some kind of humble brag, but it is important to defend our interests, that it can't just steamroll everything in favor of profits. So it had like multiple MPs and members of the House and House of Representatives over in the States. So it's like, the people who are meant to be speaking up for their constituents, and mayors and important like ambassadors and diplomats and business people, and then just hundreds and hundreds of alumni and just archaeologists and concerned parents and just members of the public who are, you know, they don't want to see archaeology killed like this. So they ended up having to like stop accepting letters because of the amount of letters. They get to the final review, and the same people who are making these strange arguments about branded supermarkets not selling bad produce or whatever, despite all of this, they just said no. Like they claimed it was like a balanced review, but they just said no. And so what's happened now is osteoarchaeology is being rolled into the medical school, and heritage school or something. They're getting moved to somewhere, and everything else is getting shut down, and everyone else is getting made redundant. And they had the final decision last week, and they just went, just got rid of it all, which is just stunning.
Yeah, so I saw this on either Facebook or Twitter that the final deliberation only took them 15 minutes.
Yeah, and knowing certain members been spent shaking hands and like congratulating each other, and like they had made up their mind. It was clear from the start. Like there were so many shady things as well. So for the final decision, they released the minutes, and yeah, it took 15 minutes, and they just kind of went, yeah, we're getting rid of it, whatever. But the only reason they're releasing that is because they tried to hold the original meetings and the original panel discussions in secret. They just didn't want, they didn't test the minutes, and they wouldn't record it or anything. They wouldn't allow anything. And the only reason half of the people who got riled up about this, including me, I didn't know this was happening until another friend of mine who was invited to it just recorded it in secret and leaked it out. And it was like, wait a minute, they're trying to pull some kind of sneaky on us, where they've like already got halfway through getting rid of the department before anyone could even know about it. So yeah, the fact that it took them so little time is just like, they obviously had made up their minds. It's just, it's very shitty.
Yeah, so from what I understand, in the final deliberation, the one that only took them 15 minutes to make, several students were supposed to speak, and the two professors from the department were also supposed to speak, right?
I believe so, though I didn't end up like, I had already had to leave town to go home for the summer, and it's just kind of like, I'll leave it to you guys to do the final stand, but we and actually, I don't know if they even got to speak in the end.
So a lot of people are probably asking what this has to do with archaeology in Alabama. This has everything to do with archaeology everywhere, really, because several universities, ask themselves this question every day. Is this worth preserving? And to us, it is. Everything we do is worth preserving because it's part of who we are as a people.
Mm. Yeah, and the fact that so many people got involved trying to save our small, because our department is small, like we're, you know, renowned, but there's not many of us. So the fact that so many people got involved in the public shows that people care. But the problem is, I feel that once people hit a certain level of separation from regular people, if you're on the or much higher up and you're making these decisions, everyone's a spreadsheet and it all becomes Excel. And you look at Excel and it's like, it's all numbers. It's all who is doing the most money, who is doing the most prestige coding stuff or whatever. And it completely loses track of the importance of history community. The archaeology is like the number one way of doing. It's how you can pass down knowledge of your collective past and engage with people. And that's not something you get from an entirely STEM based worldview. And so it is important. I think it's important to scream, like, please look what happened to us, so that people can preemptively be on guard and, like, raise awareness of how much people actually care about archaeology and history and all of this, so that when the bean counters go, well, one more computer scientist is going to be better than an archaeologist, it's like, no, this is an important thing that matters to everybody. But yeah, I can't believe it. Like, it's such a sudden turnaround to go from apartment to archaeology doesn't matter. Why do we need that? Get rid of it. How could you be so ignorant?
I think you brought up a really good point earlier. Archaeology, unlike, a STEM based education, encourages you to go out into the community and talk to people so that you can get involved in what's going on. Like, say you want to run an excavation on someone's land, you actually have to talk to them and learn about them, like, as a person, instead of just, throwing a shovel in their land, which most people frown upon.
Yeah, and the thing is, with everything being so cyber these days, and we're all so connected, like the amazing technology that's helping us talk across time zones and continents, you kind of can lose track of your neighborhood's story and history. And archaeology, because what's going on. But also, a lot of people complain these days that they feel alienated or forgotten, or everything goes by them too quickly and it's too global and too connected, and they just can't connect in the way that they feel people used to. But archaeology is like a perfect way of doing that in the modern day, because a lot of people live in areas they've always lived in. And even if that's not the case for people, there's still the human connection to, oh, this happened in my backyard 600 years ago, whatever, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. And you can see the tool, whoa, whoa. And you build that connection and you build that link to your area and your community and everyone. Like, once you start doing that, you see, oh, those people over there are just like this, but slightly different. And it's so invigorating. And it really, I think it's like an antidote to a lot of people's complaints with the modern disposition. And yet people are like, no, nah, we don't need it. We'll just continue being sad. We'll just, who needs to go do some actual manual labor, actually out in the sun and touch some grass, when I can sit and be miserable inside? Because it doesn't make a small-minded way of looking at things when people ignore history and people's connections to their area in favor of tech.
I think a lot of people, they've just completely lost touch with what's underneath them. There are, centuries of history just under your feet at any given time, no matter where you are. That's a universal thing. And, so many people just forget about that because they're looking at a screen or worrying about the next place they're supposed to be or something.
Yeah, and it kind of trickles into that. Like, a lot of these decisions are made on like a government level, and you can vote and you can do that, but it takes a while for decisions to move in. And especially with heritage management and archaeology and stuff, that's never going to be the snazzy debate. You're never going to have the presidential debate talking about that rather than, whatever gets cable news going. And it's just a really short-term decision making, which, as I know, we might be predisposed to looking at things in the, a broader view, because archaeology, it's like, oh, 4 years, 5 years, that's the blink of an eye, whatever. But it's the kind of thing of, well, right this second, we don't feel we need to pay for archaeologists because we want more of something else. And there's just no consideration of the benefits long term they could have for people, both academia and the public, by having by having people around who can study these things. Like you're saying, the connection to hundreds of years of history, wherever you go, you can't escape it. Sometimes it's easy to ignore that in favor of quick fixes to whatever is trendy. And I feel like that, especially in the modern era where we're meant to be more aware of things like climate change and like stuff like that. That's a classic example of kicking it down the road and quick fixes and whatever. And you think, well, if this is such a thing that we're meant to be thinking about, how do we look after our environment and how do we look after ourselves? And then in social things, there's a big push to become more universally accepting of things. How better to do this than thinking in a big picture way about history rather than just constantly putting duct tape over whichever hole appears in your plan and just shifting it? Like, it's just drives me mad.
For those of you who are practicing archaeologists, you've developed a fondness for duct tape at this point, because it can in fact solve a majority of your problems in the field.
Yeah, that's very true.
But that goes to people trying to solve or resolve a complicated issue with a simple solution. When you're talking about archaeology, there's no such thing as a simple solution. It gets more and more complicated the more and more you look into it.
Yep. It's one of those things. If you were actually trying to understand it all in perfect detail, you'd need an entire all of history of mankind to go through it minute by minute. Like, it's infinitely complex. But even taking snippets and trying to learn that is so beneficial in so many ways. And it's just such a shame to lose another avenue for that.
I was taking a tour of one of our state parks here, and I was thinking of it from an archaeological perspective. I was looking around and I was thinking I could spend weeks out here looking for artifacts, studying the landscape, and I would still just only know a fraction of what went on out here at any given time.
Mm. Yeah, it's incredible, just the density of everything everywhere. If you stop and smell the roses in any given place, chances are you'll stumble across some form of archaeology. And if you shouldn't rob people of the ability to do that. We should be encouraging the mindset you had, where wow, the multitudes of knowledge that could be here, rather than a kind of dismissive, I'm in a park, it's nice enough, I'll take a photo and then I'll go home. Like, it's a mindset that should be promoted, because it must be helpful across all subjects. There's no way, thinking in that analytical way could be harmful. So it's, yeah, more archaeology, please.
Yeah, and that's something that you don't necessarily get from a STEM-based program. It teaches you to solve the problem, but doesn't teaches you to address the bigger issue coming from that problem. Like, you are analyzing the problem, yes, but you're, goal oriented on finding a solution, not learning more about the problem.
Yeah, and like, there is a very important role for STEM to have. It does seem a bit like I was knocking it earlier.
No, yeah,
But
I understand.
it's not STEM's fault. It's a narrow focus on it. Because like you're saying, if you are just plugging X into Y and solving it, that's a fantastic skill. But do you ever stop to assess why you're here, or what you're doing, or how you got here? And that's the kind of, self-reflective aspect of archaeology that again is another quality that is going to be, you know, just a great thing to have. And if just focusing on just minute detail, it can get you far, or for your community, or for all of us collectively. I don't think so. And yeah, it's the narrow-mindedness that is the problem. There's room for everything, but shoving us off out of the bed, off the table, whatever you want to say, just we don't need you out. It locks off such a great reservoir of thoughts and development and knowledge and everything. And it's just, yeah, it's a loss for everybody when that gets ignored.
So, what kind of research archaeologically does? I know you've mentioned several things that Sheffield has been involved in. What is the main uh, basis for the research that Sheffield does? Like, what type of archaeology does it do?
Well, it does a lot, but I would say the two main things are there's a fantastic zoo archaeological lab and collection. That's like we have a whole building, just mausoleum basically of animals of all millennia. And so there's a lot of zoo archaeological research, especially Professor Umberto Alborea. He's been doing a lot of the publicly on the news, like defending archaeology, and he is like just such a wonderful zoo archaeologist. So we do a lot of that, and then just I don't even know, like I would need a ream of paper with everything we do, but in the city, the Sheffield Castle project, which so Sheffield, like most English cities back in the day, had a quite impressive castle, but it got destroyed during the Civil War and long lost, basically. And in post World War II, this whole area got built over with, I'm not sure what the term would be. It was one of those projects that was intended to spread wealth in like a low income area that then just kind of got abandoned and ended up just one of those hulking concrete places that leads to social problems. It's like a lot of unpleasant areas, which like it had a big community around it, and it's an important part of Sheffield's history. Like that might sound a bit flippant, is that it fell on hard times and then got abandoned and got replaced with like the brand new fancy place on the other side of town. And the work they've done in that neighborhood, in that area of the city, uncovering where the castle was and slowly working on it and developing all that stuff and involving these people who quite rightly feel quite not ostracized but neglected by the city, like, oh, we'll just rebuild the center of your area in a different part of town where the gentrified hipster people will feel safer going to it. Like, they've been really ignored. And then archaeology comes here and does all this wonderful work, both on the castle and like uncovering it and finding all the history, but also helping the community and getting them involved. So that's the one they're quite proud of, like within the department. And then all the work on like Roman forts in the Peak District National Park, and like I said, Stonehenge, and we get everywhere basically. They're all over the place, but I would say those are some standout places.
So these are projects that would have been ongoing had the department not been shut down.
Yeah, and I don't know what's going to happen to them because there is a lot of local interest in keeping them going, and I assume the council is interested in it, the city council, because they are quite involved. They were on our side. They're like, yeah, archaeology is important. We need to keep it going. So the city projects, like I hope, knock wood, fingers and toes crossed, will keep going in some way. As for the research on like Stonehenge and other places around the country, I'd assume if another university doesn't step in to do it, it's just not going to get done. Like there's no one standing behind us waiting to take over it. No one was expecting it to begin with, but even if there was like foreknowledge that Sheffield was going to be going away, how would you even organize that, and how would you get people involved, and years and years and years without integrating with the people? It seems like a task that no one could actually do. So I would assume a lot of this would just be cut and just get forgotten about.
And that is another thing that we as people in the archaeological community, we depend so much on community support to, you know, just support what we do. It's important to us and it becomes important to them. So we can't do one without the other.
Absolutely. Yeah, without it's continue, and it's just like once people get a taste of it, in particular, like once they start having a project in their backyard, they're going to become as fervent defenders of anything as you've ever seen, because they see it. Oh my computer is not behaving right now, so sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah, once people get involved, they want to stay involved, and once we are seen helping them, you want to keep helping them, and everyone wants to learn. And it's just like it would be such a tragedy for all these various things to just completely fall by the wayside, just because you like imagine if so Sheffield, we're done and dusted now. There's no more Sheffield. But York and Exeter and Cambridge and Oxford, well, those last two probably not, but the other ones, Durham, all these other great universities around the country, if you've seen what happened to us, why would you extend past what you're currently doing? Like, why would you take on these projects that Sheffield has left unfinished for fear of getting hit with the same argument of you're not the cash cow we thought you were, or you're not researching enough, or you're not doing enough? And then the same fate happening to you. So it scares off further development and finishing off these projects just by, a rightful trepidation of continuing to do this stuff. Like, why would you? It doesn't seem in anyone's interest once people are getting axed for doing their job.
I think it starts to matter to people once, everyone has seen, oh, we found this, and they're just, this was here the whole time. And people are just like, no, this has not been here the whole time. Yeah, it's been here the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the gotcha moment of archaeology. You want the hidden camera somewhere to catch them when they're getting that reaction, that moment, and then it's wonderful. And you don't want, like, I can't imagine why anyone other than someone completely unconnected to archaeology who just doesn't understand it, how anyone could willingly let this go. And those people who aren't connected, we should be out there going, please just try it, just see what it's like. Like you'll enjoy it if you give it a chance.
So I've mentioned the state park hike I was on yesterday. I did stumble across a piece of colonial pottery or something. I couldn't, take the time to really look at what it was. But I was with several people who had never done any archaeological work at all whatsoever. And I showed them this piece of a bowl or a plate that's, 150, 200 years old. And I could actually see their faces lighting up just to look at it.
Yeah, it's like, especially in England, I feel like there's a tendency, and all of Europe, you're so surrounded by old stuff that it can be a little passe. Like, oh, you something old and you don't care. But when someone gets it in their hand and they're looking at like a Roman plate, and they're like, once it clicks and they're like, wait a minute, 2000 years ago, some dude was eating dinner on this. And they get that like, oh my Lord moment. And they start, that's when you've got them. That's when, everyone should get an opportunity to try that. And it's a great feeling. Seeing them doing it yourself is great. Seeing them encouraging other people, and then they come back to you and are like, oh my God, I did this. It's like, yes, that's what we're all about. It's wonderful.
So to put this in a perspective, I realize that people haven't been here in the Americas as long as they have been in parts of Europe. So I did some research. The oldest artifact ever discovered in the continental U.S. is only 16,000 years old. That's it.
Only 60,000.
Yeah, you have to, when you're studying archaeology, you have to put things into perspective of only and decades. While you're looking at something that's 2 or 3 million years old, and it's a fish hook made out of a seashell that's old, but it's also incredibly interesting that somebody took the time to carve out that seashell and stab it through a fish's face.
my connection died, so I got a sudden rush of the story. But yeah, it's like, I know the simple way of putting it is like time travel. Like, you're seeing into these people's lives in a way that like paintings and history books might not be able to do. But I think it's even beyond that. It's like when the moon landings happened, everyone was feeling philosophical about man's place in the universe. And it's like you can examine yourself from that faraway view without leaving very far from where you're from, just by looking at, people went fishing millions of years ago. People did this, people did that. People painted on cave walls the same way you did with potato stamps in kindergarten. Like, and you can examine your history and connection through that. And it's just an incredible experience of self-reflection and philosophy and everything. And it's all bound up in one field. It's fantastic.
Yeah, archaeology can give you a very wide view of the world. Like, you realize how small you are as a person compared to the grand scheme of everything.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, but it's also really cool.
It's kind of humbling if you think about it, how many people have existed in existence. And we're going back and looking for what they've left behind.
And like, on a personal level, I feel like my time studying archaeology has made me a better, a more understanding and giving, or like open-minded kind of way of, if you're just used to your neck of the woods and the way you do everything, your stories you tell yourselves, it can be quite easy to be like in your bubble and just only hear what you want to hear, and look on other people and be like, you're weird, you don't do things like I do, and I hate you because of that. It's like such an easy mindset to get into. And once you start looking at just how you've all changed over time and your area and day, and then look through people's history, it makes sense why people behave and think and do and dress and act and eat and whatever, what they do from where they're from. And learning about all of these cultures and histories is just like, it makes you, like you said, it's humbling. You're like, oh, I see where you're coming from, and I will take it as it is and learn from you, and you can learn from me, whatever. And I don't have to be so insular and grumpy, maybe. And it's just such a good influence, I think, on people to look at history and culture through that kind of long time frame and worldwide perspective.
Yeah, that's something I've thought a lot about. Here, especially in Alabama, we have a lot of native artifacts, and we don't really see much in the way of metal artifacts until, the Europeans first arrived in the late 1400s, early 1500s. And we've skipped an entire, stage of human evolution where people were making metal tools. We don't have a lot of that here.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting seeing how different cultures and societies did what they did. And how else are you going to learn this? It's all lost if you don't have a way of examining it. And that's why it's so important to take a look at it all.
Yeah. And that uh, is why we are here, why I do this show, why I continue to go out into the woods and dig holes, why we all continue to go out into the woods and dig holes. It's not because we're crazy, it's
Yep.
because we enjoy what we do. Well, we might be.
Well, it might be a little bit of the crazy.
Yeah, you do. I'm not going to lie, you do have to have a certain amount of mental flexibility to do what we do for any extended period of time.
That's a nice way of putting it. Mental flexibility.
Yeah, that's the way I'm choosing to put it, because I want people to look favorably on what we do and not think about the layers of mud that we've all washed off of ourselves from being out in the field.
Yeah.
Like
It's best not to think.
I'm
No, sorry.
surprised my skin tone hasn't permanently changed from the layers of dirt that I've had to scrub off.
Well, over here, whenever it's any field work, it's guaranteed luck. So every time I come out, I'm like one of those surfers whose water has got inside the wetsuit, even though I'm just in my coat and my gear, and it's just like made looking like a Michelin man coming full of water.
Oh, and this is the not so obvious reason why people study archaeology. You can't have a regular 9 to 5 job and be able to tell these kind of stories to people.
Exactly. The fact that this is what it is, you are getting muddy and wet and dirty and sunburnt, everything is, people see that and they want it. There's some part of us that's like, yeah, I'll do that. I want to be outside. I want to do all of this. And it's just a nice change compared to a lot of what we do these days. And yeah, it's just, once it sounds crazy, you sound like one of those nuts who do the ultra marathons or the mud races or whatever. You're like, no, it's great being exhausted and dirty and tired. But once you get them there, it's the classic story. Once someone tries it, they're hooked.
Yeah, it is. I've noticed that effect that a lot of people here who have spent, a majority of their life living in a highly urban area like New York City or San Francisco or something like that doesn't have a lot of woodland area around it. When they get outside of the city and they, find their first actual artifact, they are like hooked on it like it's some kind of narcotic. Like they will be full speed ahead from that point on the entire project, and they will be the people who, you know, change their entire person just to continue doing
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's definitely a change for the better. No knock on the New Yorkers and the San Franciscans and
No,
whatever.
no.
But it's a good lifestyle to adopt or integrate. You don't have to do it full time. Just do
Yeah.
it weekends or something. But it's so well rounded and so good for you. And I think everyone should have the opportunity to do that, which is why having the department gone is such a shame, because there's the more evangelism for archaeology there is, the better.
So back to talking about the department, is there still something that can be done to save it or keep it to where it's still in people's minds to think about?
Saving, I'm not the expert, so I don't want to say something that's not necessarily true, but from my understanding, given the final decision, what's done is done. So saving us in particular, no. If you happen to be at a university or working at a university or have some link to some institute or society like you that is looking, so you could probably do the professors a solid and help them find jobs and use the connections. But the main thing I think to take away from it is like be publicly grateful for it. Like don't let it just go, oh, we all like archaeology in our community and everyone knows that. People don't know that. And especially not the bean counters. They don't know that at all. So you need, if you like archaeology and you like how it's done in your area and how your university or whatever does it, you should be vocal. You should be defending it and supporting it in whichever ways you can. Tweeting about it, Facebook, going to events, spreading things, studying it, like doing all kinds of things just to keep it alive and like keep people aware that it is this. It's that kind of, I'm not sure activism is the right term, but being an active participant, not just occasionally seeing the cool TikTok about, cave art and going, oh, that's quite neat, I'll give it a like. Like you need to be engaged, otherwise these kind of things happen.
What we're asking you to do is don't just stop at clicking the like button or the retweet button or whatever social platform you're using. Take it one step further. Go talk to a professor, a historical society, a archaeological society, whoever. Just go get involved. Don't come to a stop sign and say that's where it's going to end. Keep going past it, because when you do that, you will be amazed at what kind of stuff you will find. And I'm just going to keep the hand gestures going so people will understand that they need to keep going.
Get over there.
Go. When the video's over, go.
Absolutely. And the thing to remember is, it's not like they're Wall Street traders or something scary. Archaeologists are mainly nerds, and they're mainly nice, outgoing people who like being outdoors. Think like park ranger kind of people who just involved. You can just be a person who has a question. You can email them or ask the video or go to an event, and they will happily talk your ear off and tell you everything and invite you to the next dig and get you involved. And it's a very like friendly field and atmosphere. So there's no reason to stop at the, well, other than actual driving, always stop at the stop sign. But
yes,
please, the metaphor stop sign, the metaphorical one, breeze right by it once you've done the safe stop. Keep going. Join in. There's no reason to not do that. You'll be welcomed, and it will be very friendly and fun, and sure, you'll get dirty, but it'll be good.
Yeah. So I think that'll just about do it for today's episode. You want to throw any more helpful wisdom out before we sign out?
I'm not sure I have any wisdom. I'm slowly melting here. So as soon as we're done, the fan's going right back on. I'm just slowly melting away. But no, just remember to stay engaged, and stay engaged in all your life, but in particular archaeology. Like, keep us around. We're a good bunch, and don't let what happened to Sheffield happen.
Well, that's going to do it for us here today. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we will see you in our next episode.